A lonely elderly farmer believed he had survived every heartbreak life could offer, until the day he found his black horse sinking into a deadly pit of quicksand, forcing him to make a desperate decision that would change both their lives forever. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment to help us bring more emotional stories from the heartland to people who still believe in courage and second chances. The dawn had barely broken over flat prairie when Samuel Hayes, a 72-year-old widower with a weathered beard and calloused hands, stepped outside to begin another quiet morning. The farm had grown painfully still since his wife passed away. Even the wind seemed to whisper differently now, slower, older, lonelier. What once had been a place of laughter and warm meals had become a patchwork of fading memories and creaking boards. The fences sagged. The barn groaned. The fields, once golden, lay fallow. Samuel lived on out of habit, rather than hope. Only one sound still brought life to the homestead, a soft, steady nicker from the pasture. Midnight, his black stallion. Tall, strong, and impossibly loyal, Midnight had been with Samuel through the worst years. The horse's eyes carried a wisdom Samuel trusted more than his own. Every morning, Midnight waited for him by the fence, lowering his head to be stroked, breathing gentle warmth into Samuel's hands. But today, the pasture was silent. Samuel frowned. "Midnight?" he called, voice thin in the cold air. Nothing. He set his coffee aside and hurried toward the fence, scanning the far end of the property where the marshland dipped into low, murky soil. Heavy fog clung to the morning like a warning. "Midnight," he called again. Still nothing. A knot tightened in Samuel's chest. Midnight never wandered far. Never. He followed the faint tracks in the damp earth, large hoof prints leading toward the marsh he always warned the horse to avoid. The ground grew softer under Samuel's boots the closer he drew to the gnarled oak tree that marked the edge of the danger zone. Then he heard it, a sound that cut through the fog like a blade. A scream, raw, choking, terrified. It wasn't human. It was Midnight. Samuel broke into a sprint he hadn't managed in years. His bad hip protested with sharp pain, but he didn't stop. He burst through the cattails and froze at the sight before him. Midnight was trapped. The stallion's front legs had sunk deep into a swirling pit of quicksand, the kind Samuel knew well. The hidden pockets that formed after heavy rains, capable of swallowing a full-grown horse in minutes. Midnight fought desperately, thrashing and crying, but every movement dragged him lower. Mud coated his chest. Panic flared in his wide, terrified eyes. "Easy, boy," Samuel shouted, stumbling forward. "Hold on." Midnight screamed again, a sound Samuel had never heard from him before, a sound that tore the old man's heart open. Samuel scanned the marshland frantically. No one was around. No neighbors. No ranch hands. No help. Just him, and the horse who had carried his grief for years. He rushed to the edge of the pit, testing the soil. It shifted dangerously beneath his boot. One more step, and he would sink too. "Stop fighting, boy," Samuel pleaded, voice breaking. "Please just stay still. I'm right here." But Midnight's instincts fought his words. He thrashed harder, sinking inch by inch. Samuel's hand shook violently. He grabbed a long branch nearby and reached it toward the stallion. "Bite it," Samuel cried. "Hold on." Midnight tried, teeth scraping the branch, but the mud pulled harder. A surge of desperation flooded Samuel's chest. He threw the branch aside and tore off his jacket, wrapping it around his hand as he crawled closer, dangerously close, letting the earth swallow half his knees. He reached for Midnight's reins, gripping them with every ounce of strength remaining in his aging body. "I won't let you go," Samuel whispered fiercely. "You hear me? I won't." Mud splashed as Midnight jerked again, pulling Samuel forward until he nearly toppled into the pit. The horse's breath was wild and frantic, puffing clouds of fear into the cold air. "Please," Samuel choked. "Don't do this. Don't leave me too." For a moment, Midnight's thrashing stopped. The stallion's eyes locked on Samuel, not in panic, but in trust. A silent understanding passed between them. Samuel wiped tears from his cheeks with muddy fingers. "Good boy, that's it. Stay with me." But time was running out. Midnight was sinking again, slowly but surely, the mud tightening around him like a fist. Samuel looked around desperately, searching for anything he could use. A rope? A plank? A miracle? Nothing. Then he saw it, an old half-rotted fence rail, lying near the cattails. Too short to rescue a horse, but strong enough to anchor himself. A dangerous idea struck him, reckless, foolish, desperate. He grabbed the rail, wedged it across 2 tree roots, and looped Midnight's reins around his own waist. "Hold on, Midnight," Samuel whispered. "If you go down, I go with you." The stallion cried out, terrified. Samuel pulled, with everything he had left. Samuel pulled with every ounce of strength left in his aging body. His muscles trembled violently, ligaments screaming, breath bursting in ragged gasps. The reins bit into his waist as the fence rail anchored him in place, acting as a lifeline against the marsh's deadly pull. "Come on, boy, come on," he pleaded through clenched teeth. Midnight strained forward, nostrils flaring, his body quiver with the effort to lift himself from the quicksand. His hooves slurp against the mud, rising inches at a time before sinking again with a sickening pull. The earth wanted him. Samuel refused to let it win. His boots dug into ground, so deep the marsh nearly swallowed them too. Pain shot down his spine, sharp as lightning. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. Each beat a warning he didn't have time to heed. "Stay with me," Samuel shouted, voice cracking. "Fight, Midnight, fight." The stallion let out a primal, guttural scream, the sound an animal trapped between terror and trust. He lunged upward again, mud flying in thick streaks across Samuel's face and shirt. For a moment, Midnight's front legs broke free, splattering Samuel with cold sludge. "Yes, that's it," Samuel gasped. "Keep going." But then Midnight slipped again, the mud pulling at him like quick fingers. His body sank deeper. Mud rose past his chest, nearing his shoulders. "No, no, no." Samuel yanked the rein so hard the leather burned his palms through the jacket wrapped around his hand. His legs buckled, his breath faltered, but he didn't stop. "This isn't how your story ends," Samuel whispered desperately. "Not you. Not after everything we've survived." For a second, Midnight stilled. His trembling eased, his dark eyes fixed on Samuel with a clarity that pierced straight through the old man's heart. A silent plea, a final trust. The same trust Samuel once saw in his wife's eyes when he promised her he'd carry on, a promise he hadn't kept. Midnight was the only living soul who had pulled him back from the abyss of loneliness these last few years. Losing him now would rip open every wound Samuel had tried so hard to bury. "Please," Samuel whispered, "don't give up on me too." As if hearing the words, Midnight surged upward with a burst of adrenaline, a desperate, heroic attempt fueled by instinct and the bond forged between them. His front legs burst free again, hooves slamming onto firmer ground. The rein snapped tight around Samuel's waist, pulling him forward so hard he nearly fell face first into the marsh. He grunted, dug his heels into the earth, and leaned back with all the strength he had left. The fence rail groaned under the strain. "Come on," Samuel roared. "Come on." Midnight lunged again, and this time his entire front half broke free. Mud splashed like an explosion. The suctioning grip of the quicksand loosened just enough for Samuel to pull harder. But the marsh wasn't finished. The sudden shift in weight caused the ground under Samuel to collapse. His left leg plunged into a soft pocket. He gasped as the mud swallowed him up to the knee. "No!" he choked, desperately pulling his leg free. The cold sludge clung to him like icy fingers. Midnight neighed loudly, thrashing with renewed panic. Samuel forced himself upright, ignoring the sharp sting in his hip. "Keep trying," he rasped. "Just a little more." Midnight heaved again, body trembling violently. The reins cut deeper into Samuel's waist, bruising bone and flesh. His breath faltered, vision dimming around the edges. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Light, cautious footsteps behind him. "Mr. Hayes?" Samuel whipped his head around. A teenage boy, Caleb Dunn, the neighbor's grandson, stood at the marsh's edge, horrified at the sight of the sinking stallion. "Good Lord!" Caleb gasped. "What happened?" "No time," Samuel shouted. Find something long, a branch, a plank, anything to give him leverage. Caleb scrambled into the trees, snapping branches, dragging anything he could carry. He returned with a long cedar limb and wedged it beneath Midnight's chest, pushing down with all his weight. "Come on, Midnight," Caleb yelled. "Push against it." Midnight let out another guttural cry and pressed downward, between the combined force of Samuel pulling and Caleb creating leverage. Midnight's body shifted, slowly, agonizingly, 1 inch at a time. Then, thwomp, Midnight's hindquarters broke free, with a sickening pop of suction. Mud sprayed everywhere. The stallion collapsed forward onto firmer ground, chest heaving, legs shaking violently. Samuel collapsed too, breath tearing from him in painful bursts. Caleb fell onto his back, panting. Dear God, I thought he was gone. Samuel crawled forward to Midnight's face, pulling the stallion's head gently into his arms. "You did it," he whispered through tears. "You stubborn, beautiful creature, you did it." Midnight let out a low, trembling nicker, weak but alive. Caleb sat up, wiping mud from his forehead. "We need to get him warm. Clean him. Make sure his lungs didn't take in too much muck." Samuel nodded, wiping tears and grime from his face. "Help me get him up." Together, the old man and the boy coaxed Midnight to his feet. Samuel leaned heavily against the horse's flank, muscles trembling, heart pounding. They had escaped death, but barely. And as Samuel looked toward the marsh, the place that had nearly taken his last companion, a cold realization seeped into him. He might have saved Midnight's life, but something in the horse's desperate cry hinted at a deeper danger ahead. Midnight trembled violently as Samuel and Caleb guided him towards solid ground. His legs wobbled. His breath came in short, uneven bursts, and thick clumps of mud dripped from his coat like melting tar. But his eyes were alive, wide, alert, burning with something Samuel had never seen so clearly in the stallion before. Fear, not fear of drowning, not fear of the marsh, fear of something else. Caleb wiped his muddy hands on his jeans, chest heaving. "He's still shaking bad," he said. "We got to get him to the barn." Samuel nodded, brushing a trembling hand through Midnight's soaked mane. "Easy now, boy, we're almost there." The stallion's ears flicked rapidly, swiveling toward the tree line, toward the distant hills, toward the open field, as if searching for threats in every direction at once. His body tensed each time the wind shifted. His breath hitched when a crow cried overhead. Samuel frowned. Midnight had never behaved like this. Never. Caleb noticed, too. "It's like he's expecting something to jump out at him," the boy murmured. Samuel tightened his grip on the reins. Something must have spooked him. Something bad. The thought made his stomach twist. At the barn, they coaxed Midnight inside and led him into the stall filled with clean hay. The familiar scent of straw and warm would usually calm the horse. But not today. Midnight paced, turned his head sharply, snorted at shadows that weren't there. Samuel's heart hammered with worry. He grabbed a wool blanket and draped it over the stallion's back, rubbing his sides vigorously to restore circulation. Midnight flinched but allowed it, trusting Samuel more than his own instinct to flee. Caleb brought a bucket of warm water. "Here," he said gently. "Drink a little." Midnight dipped his muzzle into the bucket, but jerked it back instantly, ears twisting again toward the barn door. Samuel groaned softly. "What happened out there, boy?" he whispered. "What scared you so badly you ran straight into a death trap?" Caleb bit his lip. "Maybe coyotes chase him?" Samuel shook his head. "Coyotes don't chase horses. And Midnight isn't the type to bolt." Caleb hesitated. "Then what made him run?" Before Samuel could answer, a deep rumble rolled across the valley, a distant thunder, low and unnatural. Midnight froze, muscles locking into rigid tension. Samuel's breath caught. What in God's name was that? Caleb stepped to the barn door and peered outside. Storm, maybe? But the sky was clear, painfully clear, pale blue stretching far across the horizon. Not a storm. Something else. Midnight let out a soft, trembling whine, a sound Samuel had only heard once before years ago, when a wildfire swept too close to property. It wasn't fear of weather. It was fear of danger, a warning. Samuel placed both hands on Midnight's cheeks, gently guiding the stallion to look at him. "Look at me, boy. Tell me what you're trying to say." Midnight exhaled, slow and shaky, and for a moment, something passed between them, a silent understanding, the kind forged only by years of shared grief and companionship. Caleb stepped back, voice dropping to a whisper. "Mr. Hayes, I think something's coming." Samuel nodded. "I feel it too." Midnight suddenly stomped his hoof hard against the stall floor, once, twice, then backed up, pushing against the far wall. His eyes locked toward the open pasture, toward the marsh beyond, toward the direction he had come from. Samuel's blood ran cold. Caleb turned slowly. "You think someone scared him?" Samuel swallowed. "Or something." The rumble echoed again, louder this time, closer. Midnight reared suddenly, crying out in panic as hay scattered beneath him. "Whoa! Easy!" Samuel shouted, throwing his arms around the stallion's neck, grounding him with everything he had. Midnight settled, trembling violently. Caleb looked at Samuel, face pale. Whatever scared him into that marsh, it's still out there. Samuel tightened his grip on Midnight's mane, and it's coming closer. The rumble rolled across the valley a third time, not thunder, not machinery, not anything Samuel had ever heard echo off these plains. It was too deep, too long, too alive. Midnight trembled so hard that his stall shuddered beneath him. Caleb swallowed, eyes scanning the skies again as if hoping the sound had a logical source. "It can't be a storm," he murmured. "Clear skies, not a single cloud." Samuel stepped beside him, gripping the barn doorframe to steady himself. Saving Midnight had pushed his old body harder than it had been pushed in decades. His muscles twitched with exhaustion, but he forced his focus outward. The fields were unnervingly still. The wheat barely moved despite the faint breeze. The marshland beyond the fence glistened with patches of stagnant mud, the very ground that had nearly swallowed Midnight alive. Everything seemed frozen in time, except Midnight. The stallion's ears pinned flat against his skull. His breath came short and panicked. His gaze locked on the distant ridge beyond the marsh, his entire body turning rigid as iron. Samuel followed his line of sight. Nothing, just empty prairie stretching to foothills. "Are you sure you heard something?" Caleb whispered, voice tight with fear. Another rumble trembled through the air. The barn roof vibrated. Dust fell from the rafters. Caleb stumbled backward. "What is that?" Samuel's voice dropped to a low rasp. "Something big." Midnight let out a soft, choking cry. Not a warning this time, not a plea. A memory. Samuel recognized it instantly. Midnight had cried the same way 5 winters ago. The night a mountain lion crept toward the old chicken coop. The stallion had paced for hours, restless and fearful, until Samuel finally discovered the predator lurking in the shadows. But this sound was heavier, more desperate. Samuel placed a hand on the horse's trembling neck. "Show me, boy," he whispered. "What scared you out there?" Midnight turned his head slightly, nudging Samuel's shoulder, not pushing him away, but urging him toward the barn door. Caleb saw it too. "He wants you to go outside." Samuel's breath hitched. "I'm not leaving him. Not after what he went through." But Midnight nudged him again, more forcefully this time. His eyes were wide and pleading. "He's trying to warn you," Caleb whispered. Samuel stepped outside into the open yard. Midnight's cries followed him, but the stallion stayed inside the barn, pacing anxiously along the back wall as though he could not bring himself to face the marsh again. The old farmer shaded his eyes and stared toward the marshland, the ridge, the horizon. Fog had begun to creep in, slow and unnatural, rolling along the ground instead of drifting from above. It moved like fingers spreading across the earth. A chill coursed through Samuel's spine. Caleb stepped beside him, gripping a pitchfork like it offered real protection. "Mr. Hayes, do you see that?" Samuel nodded slowly. "Fog shouldn't move like that." The rumble sounded again, closer, louder. Samuel felt it vibrate through the soles of his boots. And then movement. A cluster of dark shapes emerged at the far ridge. At first, they looked like boulders shifting. Then they moved again, faster this time, descending along the slope in an uneven, almost staggering formation. Wild cattle, Caleb guessed. Samuel shook his head. Cattle don't run like that, and not in packs. The shapes grew clearer. Hungry, ragged, driven. Wolves. Not just a few, a pack. The largest Samuel had ever seen in his lifetime. Caleb gasped. There must be 20 of them. The alpha, a massive gray beast, lifted its head, sniffing the air. Midnight cried out from inside the barn, hooves striking the stall door. He knows they're coming, Samuel murmured. Caleb's face turned pale. We have to call someone. No signal out here, Samuel said. And even if we could, no one will reach us in time. The wolves descended the ridge, spreading like shadows across the field, weaving among the brush with cold precision. Their eyes glinted in the rising light of the morning sun. Caleb's voice broke. Why are they coming this close to the farm? Wolves usually stay in the high country. Samuel clenched his jaw. Something drove them down. Something scared them. The realization struck both of them at the same moment. Midnight, his panic, his wild dash through the marsh, his refusal to drink, his cries in the barn. He hadn't been fleeing the marsh. He had been fleeing them. The wolves reached the edge of the marshland. Their paws sank slightly into the soft mud, but they skirted the dangerous ground, moving with predatory intelligence. They're not hunting livestock, Samuel said. They're hunting something that ran. His stomach twisted painfully. Midnight had run straight toward the marsh because he had nowhere else to go. The quicksand was an accident, but the chase wasn't. He ran for his life, Samuel whispered, and stumbled into the worst place he could find. Caleb stepped backward toward the barn. We need to barricade everything. Now! Samuel turned the barn door and froze. Midnight stood trembling inside, staring directly at him. His eyes glistened with a terrible truth. He didn't fear wolves. He feared losing Samuel again. Samuel's chest tightened. I'm here, boy. I'm not leaving you. But even as he spoke, the wolves began circling. Their breaths echoed across the field, low and menacing. The alpha stepped forward. It stared straight at the barn door, straight at Midnight. And then it howled, a sound of hunger, a sound of claim, a sound of war. Midnight reared inside the barn, slamming his hooves against the stall wall in pure terror. Caleb's hands shook. Mr. Hayes, what are we going to do? Samuel swallowed hard. We make a stand. The wolves closed in with predatory patience, their paws whispering over the cold earth as they spread across the field like a tightening net. The fog thickened around them, coiling in pale ribbons, swallowing their bodies until only their glowing eyes cut through the haze. Samuel felt the weight of his age more sharply than ever. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the crushing realization that he was outmatched. Wolves didn't approach farms like this unless desperation pushed them or unless something had enraged them enough to throw instinct aside. Caleb backed slowly toward the barn, pitchfork raised, though its trembling prongs betrayed how terrified he truly was. Mr. Hayes, we have to lock the doors. They're coming straight for the barn. Midnight reared again inside, slamming his hooves against the stall wall with such force that dust rained from the rafters. His terror was beyond animal instinct. It was memory. He knew what those wolves were capable of. He had fled from them, fought to survive them, and nearly died because of them. Now they were here. Samuel held up a hand to keep Caleb steady. Slow, don't run. Running makes you prey. The alpha wolf stepped forward, a massive gray shape rippling with muscle. Its breath puffed in the air, slow and controlled. The breath of a creature confident in its power. It locked eyes with Samuel. A chill cut through the old man's spine. That animal didn't look at him with curiosity. It looked at him with ownership, as if Samuel himself was prey guarding a larger prize. Midnight cried from the barn, a haunting, broken sound. Caleb whispered, It's him they want. Midnight. They must have chased him for miles. Samuel nodded grimly. Then they're not leaving without a fight. He grabbed a rusted iron rake from beside the barn door, the closest thing he had to a weapon, and positioned himself in front of the entrance. Caleb's voice cracked. "Mr. Hayes, you can't fight them. Not like this." Samuel didn't look away from the wolves. "I'm not fighting to win. I'm fighting to buy midnight time." Midnight let out a soft, trembling whine, as if begging him not to do something reckless. Samuel turned his head toward the stallion, voice steady. "You saved my life more times than I can count," he whispered. "Let me return the favor." The alpha howled, sharp and commanding. The wolves advanced. Samuel spread his stance, planting his boots firmly in the dirt. His heart hammered, but his resolve burned hotter. He had lost too much in life, his wife, his youth, the steady warmth of family. But he would not lose midnight, not while he still had breath in his lungs. The first wolf lunged. Samuel swung the rake, and a wide arc metal clanged against teeth. The wolf yelped and retreated, limping. Two more circled. Caleb shouted, "Behind you!" Samuel turned just in time. A dark blur burst through the fog straight at him. He drove the rake down, pushing the wolf aside, but the impact knocked Samuel to one knee. Pain shot his thigh like fire. Caleb charged forward with a pitchfork. Get away from him. He jabbed the air, driving the wolves back momentarily. Their growls deepened, not a retreat, but reshuffling a strategy. The alpha stepped forward again. Samuel pulled himself upright with Caleb's help. Sweat and fear dripped down his back. His breath came ragged. "They're testing us. They're looking for a weakness." Caleb trembled. "We are the weakness." A chilling truth. The wolves prowled closer, more emboldened now, sensing Samuel's wavering strength. Midnight screamed, not in fear, in defiance. He kicked open the stall gate, splintering the wood, and burst from the barn. His body was still weak from the quicksand, trembling under the weight of exhaustion, but he stood tall, a towering black silhouette against the fog. "No!" Samuel shouted. "Get back inside." Midnight ignored him. His ears flattened. His nostrils flared. His body lowered into a protective stand Samuel had seen only once before. The night Midnight fought off a coyote that threatened Samuel's chickens. But these weren't coyotes. The alpha snarled, a deep guttural sound that echoed through the valley. Midnight responded with a roar of his own, a sound almost unnatural for a horse, a sound dragged from the deepest place a soul can reach. Caleb whispered, "He's challenging them." Samuel felt his heart break. Midnight was wounded. He could barely stand an hour ago. Facing one wolf was dangerous. Facing 20 was suicide. "Don't do this," Samuel whispered, tears rising. "Midnight, please." But the stallion stepped forward anyway. The alpha lunged, a blur of gray fur and snapping teeth. Midnight pivoted, striking out with a powerful kick that connected with the predator's jaw. The wolf spun in the air and crashed to the ground. The pack exploded. Wolves rushed in from every direction. "Caleb!" Inside the barn, Samuel shouted. Caleb grabbed the old man's arm. "I'm not leaving you." "Do it now." Caleb reluctantly dragged Samuel backward into the barn, slamming the heavy door shut. They pushed feed sacks and crates against it, barricading as fast as their shaking hands could move. Outside, the sounds tore through the walls. Snarls, hooves pounding, teeth clashing, Midnight's cries. Samuel pressed his hands against the door, tears streaming down his face. "Hold on, boy, hold on." A heavy thud slammed the exterior wall. Another. Caleb backed away, pale as snow. "If they break in..." Samuel shook his head. "They won't break in." But his voice trembled, because he wasn't sure. Outside, Midnight fought, not to kill, not to win, but to protect the man who had saved him from the marsh.